Amya Richardson wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. She was just being 12, standing in the shoe aisle of Dick's Sporting Goods inside South Park Mall in Charlotte, talking sneakers and school with her best friend Kayla Torres. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that familiar retail glow. Rows of Nikes and Adidas lined the walls like colorful soldiers. "I'm telling you, these are the ones," Amya said, holding up a box of purple and white high tops. "They're perfect for basketball tryouts." Kayla grinned, flipping through another stack. "Girl, you know you can't jump that high anyway." Amya laughed, nudging her friend's shoulder. "Watch me prove you wrong next week." It was supposed to be a simple shopping trip. Her mom had dropped her off an hour earlier with $40 and instructions to meet back at the food court by 5. Nothing complicated, nothing dramatic, just a normal Saturday afternoon. But then Kayla asked the question that changed everything. "Wait, why isn't your mom picking you up until later? I thought she was off today." Amya shrugged, setting the box back on the shelf. "She is off, but she had to stop by Fort Bragg first. Something about a ceremony. She's in special forces, so her schedule gets crazy sometimes." The words came out easy, casual, like saying her mom worked at the bank or taught elementary school. Because to Amya, it was just a fact. Her mother, Sergeant Major Nicole Richardson, served in the Army. She'd been deployed overseas more times than Amya could count. Their living room wall held a shadow box filled with medals and patches, each one representing a story her mom rarely talked about. Kayla's eyes went wide. "Wait, your mom's actually in the Army, like for real?" "Yeah," Amya said, smiling a little. "She just got back from a mission a few months ago. She doesn't talk about it much, but I know it was overseas somewhere. She sends me letters when she can't call." Kayla opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a sharp laugh cut through the air. It wasn't a friendly laugh. It was the kind that made your stomach drop, the kind meant to make you feel small. Amya turned toward the sound, her smile fading. A man stood a few feet away, flipping through a rack of Under Armour hoodies. He was tall, white, maybe in his 40s, wearing jeans and a faded Carolina Panthers t-shirt. A badge hung from his belt, glinting under the lights. Off-duty cop, Amya thought. She'd seen enough of them around Charlotte to recognize the look. He was still chuckling, shaking his head like he'd just heard the funniest joke of his life. "Special Forces," Officer Colton Reeves said, loud enough for other shoppers to hear. "Come on, kid. I've been in law enforcement for 20 years and I can tell you right now, there's no way your mom is running around with the green berets." Amya's face flushed hot. Around her, people started to notice. A mother with a toddler in her cart slowed down, pretending to look at socks but clearly listening. A pair of teenage boys near the clearance rack nudged each other, whispering. Kayla leaned closer to Amya, her voice low. "Just ignore him. He doesn't know what he's talking about." But ignoring wasn't an option. Officer Reeves wasn't finished. He chuckled again, louder this time, addressing the small crowd that had begun to form. "Look, I get it. Kids like to make up stories. My son used to say his dad was Spider-Man." He grinned, clearly enjoying himself. "Same kind of thing, cute but not real." The words hit Amya like a slap. Her hands trembled as she shoved the shoe box back onto the shelf, the cardboard scraping loudly. She wanted to defend her mom, wanted to tell him he was wrong, but every word stuck in her throat. "Why would you say that in front of everybody?" Kayla whispered, her voice tight with nerves. Amya swallowed hard, forcing herself to speak. "Because it's true." That small act of defiance only made Officer Reeves laugh harder. He tilted his head, addressing the onlookers like they were all in on the joke together. "See, that's what I'm talking about. Cute kid making up a fantasy. Look, sweetheart, there's nothing wrong with wanting your mom to be a hero, but you don't have to invent fairy tales." Fairy tales. The word landed like a stone in Amya's chest. Her mother wasn't a fairy tale. She was real, flesh and blood, scars and strength. A woman who tucked Amya in at night one week and flew halfway around the world the next. But standing there under the bright lights of a sporting goods store, Amya couldn't prove it. and Officer Reeves knew it. His smug grin told her he thought he'd won. "Tell you what," he said, tapping his badge. "If your mom's really special forces, maybe she should come by the station sometime. We could use a good laugh." Amya's vision blurred. She thought of her mom's calloused hands, the rows of medals in their living room, the way strangers stepped aside when Nicole walked through airports in uniform. Her mother had risked her life more times than Amya could count, and here was a man tearing it all down with a smirk. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "You don't know anything about her." The sentence hung in the air, fragile and defiant all at once. Officer Reeves's smile faltered for just a second, but he recovered quickly, clapping his hands together like the matter was settled. "Sure, kid, whatever you say." Around them, shoppers exchanged glances, some amused, some uncomfortable. But no one stepped in. No one said, "She's telling the truth." The silence only made it worse. Kayla tugged gently at Amya's sleeve. "Amya, maybe we should just wait outside." But Amya couldn't move. Her sneakers felt glued to the linoleum floor. This wasn't just about being embarrassed. It was about her mom, her truth, her pride. And watching it all get mocked in front of strangers made her chest burn with something she couldn't name. Still, she lowered her eyes to the floor tiles. Because what could she really do? She was just a kid. But what Amya didn't know was that at that very moment, Sergeant Major Nicole Richardson was walking through the sliding glass doors of the mall in full uniform, headed straight for the store. Part 2. The mockery deepens. The sporting goods store suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. Every corner seemed filled with eyes, all of them on Amya. She shifted her weight from foot to foot, hugging her arms around herself, but nothing helped ease the burning shame crawling up her neck. Officer Colton Reeves leaned casually against the display rack, as if he had all the time in the world, as if humiliating a 12-year-old girl was just another way to pass a Saturday afternoon. "You know," he said, his voice carrying easily across the aisle, "people don't realize what kind of training it takes to make it into special forces. Years of grueling work. Combat deployments. The best of the best." He shook his head, that half-smile still plastered on his face. "It's not exactly the kind of job you hear about at PTA meetings." He laughed again, and the sound twisted into Amya's chest like a knot. "And you expect me to believe your mom is one of them?" The words hung in the air, heavy and mocking. Amya wished she could explain, wished she could talk about the times her mom had been gone for months, the letters written in pencil because phones weren't always safe to use, the nights Amya cried into her pillow because she missed her so much. But she couldn't, not with him staring her down, not with strangers circling like they were waiting for a show. Kayla glanced nervously at the other shoppers. "We should just go," she whispered again, her voice barely audible. But Amya shook her head. Her throat felt tight, but she forced the words out anyway. "I don't care if you believe me. My mom doesn't need your approval." That answer should have ended things. It should have been enough to make Officer Reeves back off and let them leave. But he wasn't the kind of man who let a child have the last word. He took a step closer, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel personal, but still loud enough for others to hear. "Listen, sweetheart. I know you want to feel proud, but making up stories isn't the way. People are going to laugh. And honestly, a little girl like you doesn't know what real sacrifice looks like." Amya's ears burned. The tears she'd been fighting so hard to hold back blurred the shelves in front of her. Kayla put a hand on her sleeve, but Amya pulled away, fists clenched at her sides. From across the aisle, a man in a baseball cap muttered under his breath, "Just let the kid talk, man." His voice wasn't loud enough to carry weight, and Officer Reeves ignored it completely. Amya swallowed hard and spoke up again, her words shaking but steady enough to be heard. "You're wrong about her. You're wrong about everything." That earned another laugh from Officer Reeves, but this one wasn't just amusement. It was the laugh of someone convinced they'd already won. He looked around the store, almost inviting others to share in the joke. "Wrong. Kid, I've worked side by side with real heroes. I've met soldiers. I've met the guys who actually go overseas and do the dangerous stuff." He paused, his eyes narrowing, And trust me, they don't look like your mom." The last sentence landed heavier than anything else he'd said. Amya froze, her face burning with shame and fury. She knew exactly what he meant, and so did everyone listening. Kayla gasped. "That's not fair," she blurted out. "You don't even know her." Officer Reeves turned his gaze on her, his grin spreading wider. "And you do," he said. "What? Did you two sit around swapping war stories? Please. I've been in uniform longer than you two have been alive. I think I know what's real and what's made up." Kayla shrank back, but Amya stood her ground, though her hands trembled at her sides. "You'll see," Amya said quietly. "She's coming." Officer Reeves smirked. "Sure she is. Maybe she'll parachute right through the skylight, huh?" He chuckled, shaking his head like the joke was too good to resist. "Don't worry, kid, you'll learn. The world's tough. Better to face the truth now than keep living in make-believe." Shoppers whispered. Some shook their heads. Others quietly pulled out their phones, angling them toward the scene, recording. Amya noticed a woman pretending to flip through yoga pants, her phone slightly tilted in their direction. A teenage boy near the checkout nudged his friend, pointing. The humiliation weighed on Amya like a heavy backpack she couldn't take off. For the first time, she wished she hadn't said anything at all. Maybe she should have kept quiet, kept her mom's life private the way Nicole often asked her to. But the thought of Officer Reeves smirking, of everyone believing his version instead of hers, made her chest burn with something deeper than embarrassment. She wiped her eyes quickly with the back of her hand and stood a little taller. "You'll see," she repeated, her voice firmer this time. The officer leaned back against the rack of hoodies, folding his arms like he'd just wrapped up a case. "We'll see, huh?" he said with a smirk. "All right then, I'll wait." The silence after his words felt louder than the music playing over the store's speakers. Every second stretched out, the crowd restless but curious. Some waited to see if Amya would break, if she'd shrink away in shame. She didn't. But while Amya stood there, fighting not to cry, her mother was already walking past the food court. Her boots struck the tile floor with purpose, each step bringing her closer, and everything was about to change. Part 3. Standing alone, Amya's heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. She stayed planted in front of the shelves of sneakers, but inside, she was screaming to disappear. She wanted to rewind time, to go back to the moment before she'd opened her mouth. If she had just said, "My mom's busy," none of this would have happened. Now strangers stared at her like she was the star of a show she never agreed to be in. Officer Colton Reeves stood with his arms crossed, rocking back on his heels, that smirk still glued to his face. "You're awfully quiet now," he said, "starting to realize you might have stretched the truth a little." The words stabbed deep. Amya kept her eyes down, but his voice dragged her back up every time. She could hear the whispers circling around her. "Why is he going after her like that?" someone muttered from a few aisles over. "Maybe the kid really did make it up," another voice answered, low but not low enough. Kayla tugged at her sleeve again. "Amya, please. Let's just wait for your mom outside. You don't have to keep talking to him." But Amya's chest burned with something she couldn't name, anger, shame, or maybe both twisted together. "I'm not lying," she whispered, mostly to herself. Officer Reeves leaned closer, his voice dropping a notch. "Look, I'm trying to save you from yourself. You run around telling stories like this and people are going to laugh. Not everyone's going to be nice about it. You're better off sticking to the truth. Your mom works hard, she takes care of you, that's enough. No need to pretend she's some kind of war hero." Her fingernails dug into her palms. Pretend. That word echoed in her head. Pretend. As if the nights she cried into her pillow because she missed her mom were imaginary. As if the medals in the shadow box on their wall were souvenirs from a gift shop. For the first time, doubt slipped in. Not because she questioned her mom, but because she questioned herself. Maybe she shouldn't have spoken so casually. Maybe it was her fault strangers now thought her mother's life was a joke. She bit the inside of her cheek so hard it stung. Kayla whispered close to her ear, "He doesn't matter. You know what's true." But it didn't feel like that. Truth didn't matter when no one believed you. Officer Reeves shifted his weight, glancing around the store like he had an audience to keep entertained. "Tell you what," he said, almost chuckling. "If your mom walks in here in uniform, I'll buy you those sneakers myself." He gestured toward the wall of shoes. "But until then, maybe keep the fairy tales at home." Fairy tales again. Amya's vision blurred, but she refused to blink. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. A woman nearby, holding a basket of clearance shirts, finally spoke up. "She's just a kid," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Officer Reeves turned his head slowly, locking eyes with the woman. "And I'm just telling her the truth. Better she hears it now than keeps embarrassing herself." The woman frowned but looked away, shaking her head. No one else said a word. Amya's stomach twisted. Why didn't anyone defend her? Why was it easier for everyone to stand and watch instead of saying she was right? Her mother always told her, "Courage isn't loud, Amya. Sometimes it's just standing tall when you want to shrink." But standing tall felt impossible when the floor itself seemed to push her down. She pressed her lips together until they hurt. "You'll see," she whispered again, her voice trembling but defiant. Officer Reeves sighed like he was bored now. "Kid, I've heard it all. Aliens, superheroes, secret agents. Believe me, I've heard every story. And every time it's the same thing, kids wanting to feel special. Nothing wrong with that, but the truth," he paused for effect. "The truth doesn't need defending." His words dug deep. Because wasn't that exactly what she was doing? Defending. If the truth was so obvious, why did she feel like she was losing? Kayla stepped between them, her small frame almost shaking. "You're being mean," she said, her voice cracking. "She's not lying." Officer Reeves arched a brow. "And how do you know?" "Because I've seen pictures," Kayla snapped. "Her mom's in uniform. She's got medals. She stopped, realizing how thin the words sounded against his disbelief. Officer Reeves chuckled under his breath. "Pictures. Anyone can buy a uniform at an army surplus store. Doesn't make it real." Amya clenched her jaw. She hated that he had an answer for everything. Hated that every word he spoke made the crowd lean a little closer, like he was telling the version that made sense. Her knees felt weak, but she forced herself to stand straighter. "You'll see," she repeated for the third time, the words coming out stronger now. Officer Reeves tilted his head, smiling like a man indulging a stubborn child. "All right, I'm waiting." The crowd wasn't whispering anymore. They were just watching, silent and still. The air thickened with expectation, every second dragging like an hour. Amya could barely breathe. Her thoughts raced. Her palms were slick with sweat. And then, just faintly, she heard it. The sound of boots against tile. Steady, certain, unmistakable. Her head snapped toward the entrance, and her heart leaped into her throat. Because walking through the sliding glass doors in full army uniform was Sergeant Major Nicole Richardson. Part 4. The arrival. The sliding glass doors at the mall entrance hissed open, letting in a burst of chatter and footsteps from the food court. Sergeant Major Nicole Richardson strode through with a posture that turned heads without her saying a word. Her camouflage uniform was crisp and clean, the patches on her sleeves catching the overhead light. Her beret was tucked neatly under one arm, and her boots struck the polished tile in a rhythm that didn't waver. She just left a ceremony at Fort Bragg and decided to surprise her daughter by picking her up herself. She hadn't expected to walk into a crowd. From across the store, Amya caught sight of her instantly. Relief surged through her chest so quickly it almost knocked the breath out of her. Her heart leaped, but so did her fear, because now her mother was about to see everything. Nicole's boots hit the tile in a steady rhythm that didn't slow. Her gaze scanned the racks of athletic wear, the line of shoppers near the registers, then stopped on the small cluster gathered near the sneaker aisle. Her daughter, face flushed, fists balled at her sides. Beside her, Kayla, looking both scared and protective. And standing across from them, Officer Reeves, leaning back like he owned the space. Nicole's jaw set. She crossed the aisle with purpose, her uniform drawing every eye as shoppers instinctively stepped aside. Amya's throat went dry. She wanted to run into her mom's arms, but something about the way Nicole moved, focused, deliberate, made her stay frozen in place. Officer Reeves spotted her too. At first, his grin didn't fade. He assumed she was just another parent arriving to pick up her kid. But as Nicole came closer, her rank insignia was impossible to miss. His smirk faltered for half a second before he caught himself. "Mom," Amya's voice cracked, louder than she meant, but the relief in it silenced even the shoppers who'd been whispering. Nicole stopped beside her daughter, her hand resting lightly on Amya's shoulder. The tension in Amya's body melted just a little under the touch. "What's going on?" Nicole asked, her voice calm but carrying weight. Officer Reeves straightened, shifting his weight, then forced a polite smile. "Evening, ma'am. Just clearing up a misunderstanding." Nicole's eyes flicked from Reeves to the circle of strangers, then back to her daughter. Amya's lips trembled. He said you couldn't be who you are. That I made it up." The words tumbled out, half shame, half desperation. Nicole didn't respond immediately. She simply studied Officer Reeves, the silence stretching just long enough for him to feel it. Reeves gave a chuckle that sounded more nervous this time. "Kids, you know how they are. Big imaginations. I was just having a little fun with her." Nicole's voice stayed even, but it cut clean. "You mocked my daughter in front of strangers and called her a liar." The man's shoulders stiffened. "Now hold on. I didn't call her that. I just said she stretched the truth," Nicole interrupted. "And you decided it was a joke. Tell me, officer, what exactly made it so funny?" The title, officer, was deliberate. Reeves's face tightened. A couple of the shoppers glanced at one another, surprised she knew. The badge on his belt glinted under the lights. He cleared his throat. "Look, Sergeant Major, with all due respect." Nicole raised a hand slightly. "Respect doesn't begin with laughter at a child." The store had gone silent. Even the music overhead seemed quieter, as if the air itself paused to listen. Amya stood taller now, the weight of humiliation lifting as her mother's presence filled the space. Kayla's eyes widened, almost in awe. Officer Reeves shifted again, the confidence draining by degrees. "I didn't mean anything by it. Just thought it was unusual, that's all." Nicole tilted her head. "Unusual doesn't mean impossible. It means you've never seen it. And maybe the problem is less about me being here and more about you never imagining I could be." Her voice wasn't raised, but the words struck harder than any shout. Amya looked up at her mother, pride swelling inside her chest. She wanted Officer Reeves to say something now. She wanted him to try, but he didn't. His mouth opened slightly, then shut again. His smirk was finally gone. The woman with the clearance basket whispered to the person beside her, "She's the real thing." The teenage boy at the checkout muttered, "No way, that's legit." And Amya, for the first time that afternoon, breathed without feeling like the whole world was against her. Nicole squeezed her daughter's shoulder lightly before turning back to Officer Reeves. "Next time, before you laugh at a child, remember that truth doesn't need your permission to exist." Reeves's throat bobbed. He gave a stiff nod, his earlier bravado scattered like dust. But what Officer Reeves didn't realize was that the confrontation had only just begun. Nicole wasn't finished making her point. Part 5. The reckoning. The air in the store felt heavy now. No one spoke. No one shuffled through racks or pretended to browse. Every shopper within earshot had turned toward the sneaker aisle, their eyes bouncing between the officer's stiff stance and the uniformed woman standing firm beside her daughter. Nicole didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Authority lived in her posture, in the steady way she met Officer Reeves's eyes. "Officer Reeves," she said evenly, glancing at his badge. "I don't know you, you don't know me. Yet you saw fit to laugh at my daughter, to dismiss her in front of strangers. Why?" Reeves licked his lips. The confidence he'd worn so easily minutes ago was slipping fast. "Look, Sergeant Major, I wasn't trying to answer the question," Nicole said, her tone sharpening just slightly. "Why mock a child who spoke the truth?" He shifted his weight, trying to pull back some control. "It wasn't like that. I just thought she was exaggerating. Kids do that." Nicole studied him, her gaze unblinking. "Exaggerating is saying your mom makes the best cookies in the world. Exaggerating is telling your friends you can run faster than a car. My daughter didn't exaggerate. She told you who I am, and instead of listening, you laughed. A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. The woman with the clearance basket set it down, her arms crossed now, clearly invested. Officer Reeves forced out a laugh, but it sounded thin. All right, maybe I shouldn't have laughed, but you've got to understand it caught me off guard. I mean special forces. What about special forces caught you off guard? Nicole cut in. That my daughter knows the term, or that she used it to describe me. He hesitated. That pause spoke louder than anything else. Nicole leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping just enough to force him closer if he wanted to hear. You assumed, because I'm a woman, because I'm black, that I couldn't possibly hold that title. So you mocked my daughter to protect your own assumptions. Reeves swallowed hard. His eyes darted to the onlookers, realizing he wasn't just answering her, he was answering everyone. Kayla stepped closer to Amya, whispering, "He looks nervous." Amya whispered back, "Good." Officer Reeves drew in a slow breath, trying to find footing. I never said anything about race. I never said anything about women. You're putting words in my mouth. Nicole straightened, her expression calm. You didn't have to say it. Your laugh said it for you. A few people in the crowd nodded faintly. A man near the registers muttered, "She's right." Reeves's jaw flexed, his smirk gone completely now. Fine, maybe I came across wrong, I'll admit that, but I didn't mean harm. Nicole glanced down at Amya, then back at him. Intent doesn't erase impact. She stood here while a grown man with a badge turned her truth into entertainment. Do you have any idea how small that can make a child feel? Amya felt her chest tighten, not from humiliation this time, but from pride. Her mom was saying everything she couldn't. The silence stretched again. Officer Reeves shifted his weight, clearly aware of every phone camera angled his way now. Nicole let the pause hang before continuing. I've served my country for 22 years. I've led soldiers through terrain you'll never see, made decisions that carried life and death. I wear this uniform because I earned it. Every stripe, every insignia. She paused, her voice steady. And yet the hardest battle I fight is here, convincing people like you that my existence is not a joke. The words hit like steel wrapped in velvet. Reeves's face reddened. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. His arguments dried up. Nicole turned slightly, addressing not just him, but the entire store. This isn't about me alone. It's about what happens when someone decides their assumptions matter more than the truth. My daughter shouldn't have to defend my career to strangers. She shouldn't have to stand here in tears because a man couldn't imagine her words being real. A quiet clap broke the silence. The woman with the clearance basket started it, then stopped, embarrassed, but the gesture had already left its mark. Officer Reeves rubbed the back of his neck, his bravado long gone. All right, point taken. Nicole studied him one last time, then spoke quietly enough that only he and Amya could clearly hear. Next time, remember that respect costs you nothing, but its absence costs others everything. Amya looked up at her mother, her chest swelling with a pride that pushed out every bit of shame she'd carried. For the first time since Officer Reeves had laughed, she felt steady again. But even as Reeves tried to retreat, the eyes of the crowd weren't finished with him. They wanted more than an uneasy acknowledgement. And Nicole wasn't done teaching the lesson. Part 6. The apology. Officer Reeves shifted uncomfortably, his arms crossing over his chest like he wanted to fold in on himself. The crowd wasn't dispersing. If anything, it was growing. People from other aisles drifted closer, drawn by the tension, by the sight of a decorated soldier standing toe-to-toe with a police officer who had started something he could no longer control. Nicole didn't move. She held her ground, one hand resting on Amya's shoulder, her presence as steady as stone. The contrast was stark, Reeves fidgeting, Nicole calm, composed, unyielding. "You think this is done," she said softly. "But it isn't. Not until you understand what you did here." Reeves forced out a weak laugh, hoping to mask his discomfort. "Look, Sergeant Major, I said I was wrong. What else do you want from me? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry if I embarrassed your kid. That good enough?" The apology was hollow, thrown out like spare change. A few people in the crowd murmured disapproval. Nicole's eyes never wavered. No, because that wasn't an apology. That was you trying to save face. Reeves's jaw worked, but nothing came out. Nicole continued, her tone still calm but sharper now. An apology is not about you. It's about the person you harmed. My daughter stood here while you laughed at her. She believed in me so much that she proudly told the truth, and you crushed it under your heel. If you want to apologize, you look at her, not at me. The weight of the moment pressed down on Reeves. He glanced at Amya, who stared back at him, lips pressed tight, eyes wet but unflinching. The officer shifted again, clearly uncomfortable with the silence that demanded more from him. Finally, he muttered, "Sorry, kid." Nicole arched a brow. "Try again." This time, the murmur of agreement from the crowd was louder. Reeves's face flushed red. His shoulders sagged under the gaze of strangers who expected him to rise to the moment. He cleared his throat and spoke louder. "Amya, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have laughed at you. I shouldn't have said what I said. You told the truth and I didn't believe you. That was wrong." Amya's chest swelled. For once, she didn't feel like shrinking. She held his gaze for a second longer, then looked up at her mom. Nicole gave the slightest nod, a gesture of reassurance. Reeves exhaled as if hoping that would end things, but Nicole wasn't finished. She turned back to the crowd, her voice carrying clearly. "This isn't about one man and one child. This is about how easy it is to dismiss someone when their story doesn't match what you expect. My daughter's truth was simple, but instead of listening, it was easier to assume she was lying. How many times does that happen? How many times do kids grow up thinking their voices don't matter because someone with power decided to laugh instead of listen?" The words landed like stone on water, rippling through the group of shoppers. Heads nodded. Some looked uncomfortable, not because Nicole was wrong, but because they recognized how many times they'd seen something similar and stayed silent. Kayla squeezed Amya's hand, whispering, "She's amazing." Nicole looked down at her daughter. "Amya, you never have to be ashamed of telling the truth. Not when it's about me. Not about anything. If someone can't handle it, that's their weakness, not yours." Tears threatened at the corners of Amya's eyes. But this time they weren't from humiliation. They were from relief, from vindication, from pride. Officer Reeves rubbed the back of his neck, clearly wanting the ground to swallow him. He muttered, "I already said I was sorry." Nicole looked at him one last time. "Then live like it. Next time you meet a child with pride in their voice, don't strip it away. Let them keep it. Because once you take that from a kid, it's not so easily given back." The silence that followed was thick. Then, almost unexpectedly, a young man near the checkout counter clapped once. Another joined. Within seconds, scattered applause filled the store. Not loud, not rowdy, but steady and supportive. Officer Reeves's face burned crimson. He gave a curt nod and stepped back, retreating toward the exit, no longer the center of attention but the man who'd been schooled in front of strangers. Amya turned to her mom, her voice small but steady. "Thank you." Nicole bent down slightly so her face was level with her daughter's. "No, Amya, thank you for telling the truth when it wasn't easy. That's braver than anything I've ever done in uniform." The words sank deep, settling in Amya's heart like armor. For the first time that day, she believed it. Part 7. The lesson the store began to quiet again, though the air still buzzed with what had just taken place. A few shoppers lingered, pretending to look at shelves but sneaking glances at Nicole and her daughter. Some whispered to each other, their tones hushed but respectful now. The tension that had filled the space was gone, replaced with something heavier, something thoughtful. Amya stood taller beside her mother, still holding Kayla's hand. For the first time since Officer Reeves had laughed, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. The shame that had burned her cheeks only minutes earlier had dissolved into pride. Nicole glanced down at her. "You all right?" Amya nodded. "Yeah. I hate that it happened." Nicole's hand rested on her daughter's shoulder. "I know, but sometimes moments like this teach us more than 100 quiet days ever could. You don't forget them, and neither does anyone who watched." Kayla looked up at Nicole, her eyes wide. "You were amazing. Everyone was listening to you. Nicole gave a small smile. I wasn't just talking to him. I was talking to all of you. She glanced around the store. Never let anyone tell you your truth doesn't matter. A man in a baseball cap, the same one who had muttered earlier, finally spoke up louder. Ma'am, thank you. I've got a daughter myself. She's 9. I hope she grows up with that kind of courage. Nicole nodded once, the simple gesture carrying weight. Courage isn't about not being scared, it's about speaking anyway. Amya's chest swelled. Hearing those words said in front of strangers made her feel like her mother's pride in her was carved into the air. As the shoppers began to drift away, a woman paused near Nicole. She lowered her voice but spoke clearly enough for Amya to hear. Thank you for your service, and thank you for showing him he was wrong. Nicole's gaze softened. We all serve in our own ways. Today, my daughter served by standing tall. That's something worth respecting. The woman smiled and walked off, leaving Nicole and Amya standing by the sneakers that suddenly didn't seem so important anymore. Amya turned to her mom. Did I make it worse by saying it? Nicole shook her head. You made it better. You didn't hide who I am. You spoke the truth even when people laughed. That takes more strength than some adults ever learn. For a moment, Amya felt the weight of what had happened lift off her. She could breathe again. Kayla gave her a quick squeeze. Told you he was wrong. Amya laughed softly, wiping her eyes. Yeah, you did. They walked toward the exit together, Nicole's boots steady against the tile. People still glanced at them, but not with ridicule now, with something closer to admiration. As they stepped out into the wider mall, Amya's mind replayed the scene. The laughter, the whispers, the sting of doubt, and then her mom's voice, clear and strong, cutting through all of it. She realized that even though it had been one of the hardest moments of her young life, it had also been one of the most important. Nicole slowed her stride and bent slightly toward her daughter. Amya, remember this. People will doubt you. They'll laugh, dismiss you, try to make you smaller, but you never let them take your truth. Not for me, not for anyone. Promise me that. Amya looked up at her mom, eyes shining. I promise. Nicole kissed the top of her daughter's head, the simple gesture stronger than any speech. By the time they reached the car, Amya felt lighter. She still carried the memory of Officer Reeves's smirk, but it no longer weighed her down. Instead, it reminded her of something else, how quickly a person's assumptions can crumble when faced with the truth. And as the car doors shut and the mall disappeared behind them, Amya leaned back against the seat, still gripping Kayla's hand, and thought, I'll never be embarrassed about Mom again. Because that day, in a crowded store under bright fluorescent lights, she had learned a lesson that would stay with her forever. Never let anyone laugh you out of your own truth. And maybe, just maybe, the people who had witnessed it learned something too. That respect costs nothing, but withholding it can scar someone deeply. Part 8. Going home, Nicole started the car, glanced in the rearview mirror and said softly, You girls ready to head home? Amya smiled for the first time since the ordeal began. Yeah, let's go home. The mall faded into the distance, but the lesson stayed. And for everyone who heard it, whether they admitted it out loud or not, it would linger long after the sound of Nicole's boots had faded from the tile floor. The drive home was quiet at first. Kayla sat in the backseat beside Amya, occasionally glancing over with a soft smile. Amya stared out the window, watching the city blur past, replaying the moment her mom had walked through those doors. Nicole's voice broke the silence gently. Amya, I want you to know something. Amya turned from the window. Yeah. What you did back there took real courage, not because you argued or fought, but because you stood your ground when someone tried to make you feel small. That's not easy, not for adults, and certainly not for a 12-year-old. Amya's throat tightened. I just wanted people to believe me. And they should have, Nicole said firmly. But even when they didn't, you didn't back down. You believed in yourself. You believed in me. That's what matters most. Kayla chimed in softly. Your mom's right. You were so brave. Amya looked down at her hands. I felt scared the whole time. That's what courage is, Nicole said, her eyes on the road. Feeling scared and doing it anyway. If you weren't scared, it wouldn't take courage. The words settled over Amya like a warm blanket. She'd spent the entire afternoon feeling like she'd done something wrong, like speaking up had been a mistake. But now, sitting in the car with her mom and best friend, she realized she hadn't been wrong at all. She'd been right. And that was enough. When they pulled into the driveway, Kayla's mom was already waiting in her own car. Kayla leaned over and gave Amya a quick hug. "Text me later, okay?" "I will," Amya promised. After Kayla left, Nicole and Amya walked into the house together. The familiar smell of home, lavender candles and clean laundry, greeted them. Amya dropped her backpack by the door and followed her mom into the kitchen. Nicole poured them both a glass of lemonade and sat down at the table. "Come here," she said, patting the chair beside her. Amya sat, taking a sip of her drink. Nicole looked at her daughter with steady, loving eyes. "I need you to understand something. What happened today isn't about that man. It's bigger than him. It's about the world we live in, the assumptions people carry, the stereotypes they hold onto without realizing it." Amya nodded slowly. "He didn't think you could be what you are because you're," she trailed off, unsure how to say it. "Because I'm a black woman," Nicole finished gently. "That's the truth, baby, and it's a truth a lot of people don't want to face, but that doesn't make it any less real." Amya looked down. "Does that happen to you a lot?" Nicole sighed. "More often than I'd like, but I don't let it stop me, and neither should you. There will always be people who underestimate you, who try to put limits on what you can be. Your job isn't to prove them wrong. Your job is to live your truth so loudly that their doubts become irrelevant." Amya's eyes welled up again, but this time the tears were different. They weren't from hurt. They were from understanding. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she whispered. Nicole reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. "And I'm proud of you, always." They sat there for a long moment, just the two of them in the quiet comfort of home. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting golden light through the kitchen window. Later that evening, after dinner, Amya went up to her room. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. She thought about Officer Reeves's smirk, the way the crowd had watched in silence, the burning shame that had crawled up her neck. But she also thought about her mom's voice, strong, calm, unwavering. She thought about the way strangers had started to clap, the way the woman had thanked her mom for her service. And most of all, she thought about what her mom had said. "Your job is to live your truth so loudly that their doubts become irrelevant." Amya grabbed her phone and opened her notes app. She started typing, letting the words flow. "Today someone tried to make me feel small. They laughed at my truth because it didn't fit their idea of what was possible. But my mom showed me something important. Truth doesn't need permission. It doesn't bend to someone else's disbelief. It just is. I'm never going to apologize for being proud of who my mom is, and I'm never going to let someone take my voice away." She saved the note and set her phone down, a small smile crossing her face. Downstairs, Nicole sat on the couch with a cup of tea, looking at the shadow box on the wall, the medals, the patches, the memories of a life spent serving. She thought about her daughter's face in that store, the way Amya had stood tall even when the world pressed down on her. And Nicole smiled, because she knew that no matter what challenges Amya would face in life, she'd already learned the most important lesson: never let anyone steal your truth. Life has a way of putting us in moments we don't expect, moments that test whether we'll stay quiet or speak up, whether we'll shrink or stand tall. If this story resonated with you, let it be a reminder. Always defend the truth, no matter who tries to silence it, because truth doesn't need permission to exist. It just needs someone brave enough to speak it.